Today, we're going to talk about the 2023 Pivot Shadowcat, their new, really fun 27.5 trail bike that is light, playful, and brings something back to mountain biking that I think it's lost a little bit of, which is a bike that's just ready to have a damn good time no matter what it's doing. And I really enjoyed that about the bike. I found it so easy to ride and so much fun. It kind of gave you that first bike feeling. So I hope you like this video. Let's get into this bike. Wee-haw! Today, I'm gonna talk about the bike that I rode. A size medium Pro XTXTR with aluminum wheels. This was a great bike, really great build. It weighed about 27.5 pounds, and according to Pivot, this is the replacement for a Mach 5.5, of which I had one for almost 2 years. I don't know that I would call it a replacement of that bike. They don't exactly ride the same, even though on paper you think they would. I'll do a review of that later and talk about the differences, but for now I'm going to stay really focused on this bike. The Shadowcat is a faster, more nimble, XC-oriented trail bike with a supportive and faster ramping platform. It makes long rides something to look forward to, with an XC platform for climbing and a trail-oriented Geo for coming back down. This 140/160 bike uses easy to set up suspension with fast ramping kinematics that are progressive enough that you can get back down the hill with pretty good speed. So at 5'8", I rode a medium, and at 5'2", Deborah rode an extra small. Both were really good fits. All right, let's talk about the build. So this bike has an XTR rear derailleur, an XT 1051 cassette, XT shifter, XT 4-piston trail brakes. The center lock rotors are 180/180 front and rear with DTSwiss 350 hubs. It is a 36-star ratchet in the back, and then you have 27.5 XM1700 wheels, and the Maxxis 2.4 dissector tire front and rear. I know people like to say that's a rear tire. I actually think it's a better front tire. I'm not a big fan of that tire in the rear of a bike, and I'll get into that later. You get all Fox factory everything with that blingy Kashima gold, and that includes the dropper post in a factory transfer, 175 mil on the medium. That was really nice. You also get a DPS Evol for a 140 rear suspension and a 160 mil front fork with a Fit 4 damper and 44 millimeters of rake. It is standard boost front and rear. They got rid of Super Boost here in the back, and it does still fit a 2.4-inch tire, so that'll make wheels and tires a lot easier. So if you already have a bike that has really nice wheels and tires and you want to take the aluminum ones off, this makes it a lot simpler. You don't have the issue of the rear hub width to deal with there. And then it is a Volt branded Pivot saddle. This bike came in at about $7,699 US and is a pretty nice build for the money. Pivots are always boutique-y priced, so expect to spend a little money, but that frame, well, that frame is lighter than the Trail 429 frame and only 45 grams heavier than a Mach 4 SL frame, which is what my wife rides, is a live valve Mach 4 SL cross-country bike. And I will tell you, that is light. And that stiffness and that lightness in the frame, well, that leads to some of its riding characteristics, both good and bad. But that is pretty impressive what they've accomplished. The lines on it are fantastic, and the bike overall is just a really good-looking bike. Let's talk about the Geo and what creates the feel of this bike. Short seat tube lengths mean long droppers, if you can insert them. You're gonna get 175 mil in a medium with only a seat tube that's only 15.5 inches. That's pretty awesome and a really nice setup. On the medium I rode, you had a 627 mil top tube with 460 mil of reach. That reach really felt good on this bike. The wheelbase is only 1,206 millimeters. The bottom bracket is a nice 340 mil, a little bit higher. I really like that on this bike. 65.5 degree head tube angle with a 76 degree seat tube angle meant the climbing position was really comfortable, and only 430 mil chainstays means it turns lightning fast. That back follows that front really, really well. All right, so what does all that mean, right? What do the specs really mean to you? Well, it's got a pretty modern reach, but a very neutral rider position, and that's something I think they did a really good job of accomplishing. This bike is natural and comfortable to ride right out of the gates. Your position when you're standing and descending is really natural, plenty of front end weight traction. You do not have to shove onto the front end. You do not have to fight this bike to ride it downhill. And your seated climbing position is just incredibly comfortable. Actually really easy to get through a lot of tech seated or standing. I think they did a really good job, and this bike has great balance. Let's talk about some additional details on this bike. 27.5 front and rear, 2.4 inch tires, very playful bike. It does have very short chain stays. It does have the pivot tool docking system, the bolts that are up underneath the top tube, and it is live valve capable. So you could put live valve on this bike if you wanted to. I don't think it needs it. I guess if you're a real cross country kind of racer, this would be an upgrade you might want to make to this bike. But if you're gonna do that, I think you should probably buy a Mach 4 SL because, well, live valve isn't awesome on the descents. It's a little too firm. So I think you'd be better off leaving this bike alone as it is if you want a really good climbing bike that still descends really well. It uses Pivot's internal cable routing system. They're not like a tube-in tube, so you pull it through, big open doors, you clamp that down, it fits really well, and they're not noisy. They did a pretty good job of that. It uses the SRAM UDH rear-derailleur hanger. I think that's fantastic. I'd like everybody to get to that place. That way, if you need a rear-derailleur hanger, no problem. Anywhere you go, one of those parts. There's a lot of parts on bikes I wish they'd get over building their own unique little version. It does use the internal headset system. That's nice. It does save weight. It does mean if anything goes wrong, that's that with the bike, but that doesn't happen very often. I don't know if this bike will have the problem. I do know that the headsets tend to creak a little more when they're this way versus when they're inserts, but not every bike has that problem, and it does work really well. It's a tried and true system. Plus, Pivot seems to have really high quality control from everything I've seen in their bikes, so it may never be an issue. What does Pivot say about this bike? I'm gonna read their two phrases that are on the website. Agile, sharp, fast, and fun, the Shadowcat is a trail carving expression of blazing speed and feline creative mayhem. Pivot's latest offering capitalizes on the acceleration and responsiveness of 27.5 wheels and acclaimed DW-Link suspension to bring to life a bike that offers transformative capability for riders of every stripe. A new frame that weighs less than our impressively light Trail 429 frame. Heck, this frame weighs only 45 grams more than our feather light Mach 4 SL. We're replacing the beloved Mach 5.5 with a 140 mil ripper of a bike that weighs less than many dedicated XC machines. Super low standover, small kittens and playful cats rejoice. In marketing speak, I really think this bike targets your fit XC kind of riders based on what they wrote, maybe the female market, smaller riders. I mean, they don't make this bike in an extra large frame. They're clearly not intending this for bigger riders. So I think they're trying to say, hey, do you like trail riding, but you love to rip your lungs out and tear your legs apart on the climbs and bury your friends? This is the bike for you. I think that's what they're trying to say. And it's a lot of fun, and you're gonna have a lot of fun in the flow, and it's small wheeled, and it's poppy, and it's playful, and it's all those key marketing words. But it is by no means a bruiser. And they're really good at making sure that they're not sending that message so that people don't think they're buying an all-out downhill trail machine. And I don't disagree with them from my experience. I rode a Switchblade back-to-back behind this Shadowcat on this exact same trails, on the exact same loop, both exactly from the factory and set up without any of my parts. So I'd get a feel for what Pivot was trying to bring forward. And they are wildly two different bikes on the trail. There is no doubt about it. So they are clearly sending the message that if you want to ride hard and bruise, Switchblade. If you want to ride a trail bike that's poppy and fun, Shadowcat. The climb. The 27.5 inch wheels spin up quick. The bike gets up and over technical stuff really well. No real pedal strikes. We talked about that before. The bike has a really supported platform, so when you come up on rock ledges, it actually gets up and over them really well, better than my Mach 5.5 did, so I'm really impressed by that change in the way the bike rides. The tires are really fast rolling, the Maxxis dissectors, definitely plenty of traction on the climbs for this type of bike, especially in an EXO casing. They're light, so they spin up fast. I think all that together really helps the bike on the climbs, and you don't experience a lot of lag, and so all of that's really good. I would say overall for a 140, 160 bike, This bike climbs almost as well as my Mondraker F Podium RR, which is a World Cup shredding race machine. So it's really impressive that they have that much suspension moving forward that efficiently all the time. And I was really impressed with how this bike climbs, especially how it handles the technical ups, tight switchbacks with no problems. Everything you did at this shorter wheelbase, very nimble 27.5 bike has a climbing prowess that it shouldn't based on the amount of travel that it has. Transition and flow sections. This bike is really nimble. That's a theme we've gotten used to, and it handles the flow really well. You can steer in, you can lean in, you can be doing all those things. Whereas on a Niner, you better be leaning and you better be dipping into the corner with that shoulder. This bike, if you come up a little late and you've got to steer in, you're gonna be just fine. So you can really move around, and it's very, very playful coming through fast flow. Every little bump, rock, ledge, everything you pop off of and you play and you have a really good time. Where you do notice the 27.5 wheels versus, say, if you chose a Niner here, is you're gonna pedal more to keep your momentum up. And the bike accelerates really fast, so it's not terrible, but you will notice that in those sections you catch yourself pedaling harder to pick your momentum back up and maintain that momentum as the trail flattens out when you're going through transitions. Descending. This is where the bike gives up its XC-oriented platform. Can it descend? Yes. Can it descend in rough technical chatter and some rock garden style stuff? And can it do it fast? Well, this will start to become what your definition of fast is. Yes, it can do it, but you're going to have to be incredibly active on the bike, and you're going to really need to pick your lines, and the bike starts to kind of show what it is. Now, on the really tight switchbacks and technical sections, the bike was fantastic. When you had really sharp switchbacks, especially with multiple changes of directions, there are several times on the downhill where you'll come in and you'll go up left to a hard right that's up and back left, and you're dropping and climbing through that. The bike can just shove through that berm really well. You can stay low, you can cut corners, you can do a lot of things that you can't do on a really long wheel-based big wheeled bike. But you're gonna pedal out in places because you are gonna have some momentum stuff going on there, so you're gonna have to pedal it up. The bike, when it comes to jumping, the 7.5 is good. The landings are okay. The really firm bike means you wanna pick your landings well. You don't wanna come up short real often. The bike gives up. Like, I came up a little bit short on one of the jumps and the bike gave away that it did not like that pretty quickly. And then in the high speed chatter, be prepared to use the whole trail. The bike is gonna float across the trail quite a bit. The Fit 4 has limited adjustability. Again, they made this bike incredibly easy to set up, but it also means it has some places that it has to give, and this is where it gives. It is fast. My very first time on a run that I love to test bikes on, because I know the run well, they always get a fair shake because of it, and I can push any bike down it. I mean, I've run it a lot. And this bike was still pretty fast. I didn't break the 4-minute mark on it. That's sort of my benchmark for really fast. Once you're under 4 minutes, you're really starting to move, because you had to sort of back off because of all that trail movement you were getting on the bike. I think you could improve these things. I was running pretty low tire pressure, so that did help quite a bit. The other place you'll give up speed is descending in the steep loose. You could fix a lot of that with the tires alone. That Maxxis Dissector is a bad rear tire for braking, and when you need to brake, you're gonna have to sort of come on the brakes a little sooner. You can't slide up harder into a corner, hit the brakes, and come out, because you're gonna lock up. And that back tire just skids. It just naturally skids. I've had to run it on I've ran it on several bikes. It doesn't matter. It isn't the bike's issue that this tire does it. The tire just does it. So if you changed your tires up, you could probably really improve that. In my raw recording, I must have made comments about those tires multiple times, because they did give up quite a bit when I needed them the most. And I just had to manage that. So be prepared for that a little bit. So either change tires, or just, if you're trying to use this as an all-the-time trail bike, just brake a little sooner. It's not a bad tire. It's just not a great tire for that situation. Also, 65.8 degrees is nice, But as it got steeper, you could start to feel it. You could tell that this bike isn't going to tip over into really steep stuff like it is and be really confidence inspiring. It's short, it's twitchy in that situation, and you're going to be managing that. So does that mean the bike is slow downhill? By no means. It was not slow downhill. It's still a 140, 160 bike, and I still pushed it. I couldn't send it as far, mostly because I think I couldn't roll naturally as fast. I think if I made a few changes, I could fix that. But it was a very, very capable bike downhill. And to be fair, it is a lot of fun downhill. It is really playful. So if you're not going for all out speed, but you want to just have a party and have a good time, hey, it descends very well doing that. So who's this bike for? Well, if you love to climb and punish your friends and tear them apart all the way up the hill and beat them, this is going to be a really good bike for you. And it descends with enough capability that you're not going to lose all that time back when they come ripping down on their bruiser. You're going to be able to stay out there and keep them behind you. They may be chasing you down, but if you've made up the distance on the up, they're going to have a really hard time making it back up on the down because this bike is still pretty capable. This bike is definitely for people up to about 6 feet tall. Again, they don't make an extra large in this bike. I really feel like, a 5'8" and a medium fit me really well. At 5'10", 5'11", you're probably gonna fit a large. I think the bike is ideal in that probably 5 foot to 5'8" range. I think that's probably an ideal place for this bike. Not that it can't be ridden by everybody else, but the bike with the low standover height, the shorter wheelbases, the smaller wheels, it's gonna lend itself really well to people in that size. And again, more trail cross country, one bike all day kind of riding. I think if you're looking at a Mojo, if you're looking at a Stumpjumper, if you're looking at a 5010, this bike should be really high on your list, and it should be a bike you should be testing or really considering against any of those purchases. The other thing is, do you want to build a mullet? I don't know how it will ride, but the Geo definitely lends itself to that. I think it would improve the bike in the steeps quite a bit. It would help the front end get up and over stuff faster, which might make the back end come along even better. And the back end does come along very, very well. So you might gain some benefits. I don't know what'll happen in the corners because you are now injecting sort of a change where you're gonna have to dip the bike harder, and you might lose some of its really natural, playful capabilities by doing this. But if you're trying to sort of bruiser it up and make it even more downhill, this could be great. I also don't know how this would affect the climbing because you're going to be rotating a much larger wheel in the front. And again, this thing just is like a little rocket ship. So it would be really interesting what you would do to the bike if you made this change. It might make it awesome. It might, in a lot of areas, you might have some detriments to the bike. So that's some stuff to consider. I mulleted my Mach 5.5 and liked a lot about it, but there were some things I didn't like when I did it. So, I don't know if this bike could suffer the same consequence, but in the areas that it was a benefit, it was a big benefit. So I like this bike a lot, and it's high on my list of trail bikes that I would ride. This bike has great climbing characteristics. This bike has great descending characteristics. I think there's some things you could do to improve it. Now I'm gonna cover those. So if I bought this bike, what would I probably do to it right away? Well, I'm not a big fan of the DPS shock or a Fit 4 fork. I never have been. I have always gotten rid of that stuff. I don't even run it on my Mondraker, which is designed around it. The only person that has that is Deborah on her Mach 4 SL because it's live valve. I would in fact change this bike to an Öhlins TTX2 Air in the rear. You still have great volume spacer ability. You can still get that thing dialed in. You can adjust compression and rebound damping to fit the bike's current characteristics, and you would get a lot more support. And you would get a lot more descending capability. I think that would get that back wheel on the ground because you'd get a little bit more activity, but you should still have an incredibly efficient pedaling bike. It did not hurt my Mondraker at all to go to this, and it is way faster downhill because it planted that rear end better, and I don't get that trail chatter at the same rate that I used to get it when I ran a DPS. So I think from one instance, that's one thing to the other. Yank the damper out, throw in a grip 2. You don't even need to change the fork. It's a good fork. If you like a high platform, fast, racy kind of fork, then you like Fox stuff, and that's it. But the Grip 2 is going to give you some of that adjustment to take some of that front end chatter out and smooth that trail out just a little bit, giving you more descending capabilities and more speed while still getting great climbing. Now, I've just unsimplified their design, so that's why they don't do this, according to everything I can find in the research. They wanted an incredibly easy bike to buy and set up and ride for the average beginner to intermediate average rider, and I don't disagree with them. It's a great bike. You're gonna go ride that bike and love it, but if it's mine, these are changes I'm gonna make right away. The other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put carbon wheels on it. I'm probably not gonna go with their Reynolds upgrade. It's a $2,000 upgrade. I would prefer a set of We Are Ones, probably the Faction here, or maybe a Faction in the back and a Union in the front. I'm gonna add a few other components to it. Really nice set of cranks and some other things to keep the bike light. And I'm gonna change the tires to a little bit more of a tough trail tire that gets me a little higher traction and braking. I think I could do all that and still keep this bike around 28 pounds, which makes it an absolute beast of a trail bike, light enough to climb like a machine, but now a more brutal downhill bike that you can really have a good time on. And I might or might not mullet it. I think I would just test that to find out if it was any good. I really liked how this bike rode in a straight 7575 setup. So that's what I would do if it were something I were buying. I think those are changes I'd at least test and potentially make right away. I hope you liked this video. This was an incredibly fun bike to ride. I hope this is a bike that's on your list. It is one of the, it brings back old school mountain biking, and that's awesome. That sort of really playful feeling that bikes have sort of lost as they've gotten more modern, where they're a little more front end fighting, a little more out on the front of the bike. Bikes now are a lot more how fast can you go and a lot less how much can you play, it seems like in a lot of bikes. And this bike sort of found a way to magically put all that together and is really a fun bike. Please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and as always, I hope to see you out on the trails.